Members Standing Committee. I just want to welcome everybody. I see we have people in the chamber as well as people online. So committee members and officials and online people to sort of welcome you to the meeting. I think as we commence, if we can all just introduce ourselves for the record so we all know who's here. I am Benedicta van Minnen and I am the chair of the Standing Committee.
Good morning, Chairperson, honourable members and all officials. My name is Wendy Kaiser-Philander and I'm a committee member. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Brett Heron, member of the committee.
And the members online?
Morning, Dave Bryant, member of the committee.
Good morning, Anita
morning.
Stevens. I'm a member of this committee.
Thomas Walters,
good morning,
a member
everyone.
of the committee.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Khalid Sayed, member of the committee.
Speaker, do you want to have another go?
Good morning, colleagues. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, honourable members. Dalen Mitchell, I'm the Speaker of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament.
Thank you. And
Good morning, Chair, members, colleagues. Vernon Titus, Director Institutional Enablement, but standing in as Acting Secretary today.
Good morning, Chairperson. Andre LaRue, Senior Legal Advisor.
Morning, Chairperson. Mario Sassman, Manager Committee Support. Thank you.
thank you.
Morning, Chairperson. Morning, members. Lubabalos Temele, Director of Parliamentary Support Services. Thank you.
Morning, Chairperson. Johan Vermeulen, Committee Section.
Thank you. And any other officials who need to introduce themselves? Online? I think we've probably got everyone. Okay, so as this is a hybrid meeting, I just want to run through the rules of engagement so we all know where we are. So all members who are online must please be muted to avoid any background noises. And if you need to flag points of order, please use the chat function in MS Teams. Obviously, all video and audio must be switched off to improve the quality of the connection. But obviously, if somebody is speaking, they need to use their microphone and their video if they so choose. And then to turn off your mics once you've finished speaking. So thank you, everyone, for being here today. What we're doing really is commencing from work that was done in the previous Parliament. And it's dealing with the issue of the Constitution of the Western Cape Amendment Bill, also known as the Determination of Number of Members. It is attached, you've got that marked B6B of 2023. So on the 4th of October, the House reinstated this bill as it was, and where we reached it during the 6th Parliament. And in accordance with Rule 173, the bill was referred to the Standing Committee on Premier and Constitutional Matters. So this is where we are now, and this is why it is now before us. So at this point, I'm going to ask the Western Cape Provincial Parliament legal people to please give us the briefing on it. If I can hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, Chairperson. As you indicated, we've been asked to brief the committee on the Constitution of the Western Cape Amendment Bill, or that's what it's called presently, determination of number of members. Chairperson, the presentation I'm sharing is quite similar, not identical, but it's quite similar to the presentation we gave to the members of the public during the public involvement stage in the previous Parliament. But I actually thought that might also be useful for the committee to get a sense of what information was actually shared with the public. It has been tweaked in some respects. And I think there are some members in this committee that have probably heard this presentation in one iteration or the other on many occasions before. But but then I also think there are members that have not yet heard the presentation. So I was sort of on the fence about. Sorry, Chair, just trying to see whether there we go. As to how much detail to go into, but Chair, unless you indicate otherwise, I'll probably lean towards giving more detail rather than too little detail. Chair, I'm not going to spend too much time on the structure of the provincial parliament. I think the members and officials are all very familiar with it. That was important for I think specifically for the public to get a sense of what we are actually talking about, how many members we have, how many members are in the executive, etc., etc. So there are 42 members. I'm not going to comment on the purpose of oversight, but I do think it's important to point out of the 42 members, 11 are in the provincial executive, as we know. And then 2 of the members are the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker of the Provincial Parliament. And usually the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker won't be involved with specifically standing committee work. And so I think for the public, we just wanted to indicate that effectively when we talk about Parliament and the number of members we have that are physically working in Parliament and that are sitting on committees, etc., there are 29 members at present that are directly involved with the committee work of Provincial Parliament and with oversight and lawmaking. I think that's also useful because at the time the conversation was leaning towards 72 members. And I think it's useful to point out that that would effectively have doubled the number of members. An additional 30 members would effectively have doubled the number of members that are actually working in the legislature itself. I'll just comment on the bullet point at the bottom. So in 1999, the population was about 3.9 million residents in the province. And at the time, there was about 1 member for every 93,000 residents. And at this point in time, the most recent numbers I can get suggests that the population is 7.4 million. So at this point in time, we still have the same membership, which would mean that there's 1 member for every 167,000 residents in the province. Chair, I'm going to take a bit more time on the legal requirements for changing the number of seats. I am, after all, the legal advisor. And just point out a few important things. So in 1997, the Constitution came into effect. And what's important here is Section 105, subsection 2 of the Constitution, which provides that a provincial legislature consists of between 30 and 80 members, and the number of members must be determined in terms of a formula prescribed by national legislation. Also importantly, especially for us, Section 143 sub 1 of the Constitution, which provides that a provincial constitution or constitutional amendment must not be inconsistent with this Constitution, but may provide for provincial legislative or executive structures and procedures that differ from those provided for in this chapter. So what happened in 1999, of course, maybe I don't need to point this out, but the Western Cape is at present the only province with its own provincial constitution. So in 1999, the Electoral Commission determined the number of members to be allocated to each provincial legislature, and the Electoral Commission did so in terms of the Electoral Act as it was at the time. And the Electoral Act provided, by taking into account available scientifically based data and representations by interested parties, the number of seats of a provincial legislature must be determined by awarding 1 seat for every 100,000 of the population whose ordinary place of residence is within that province. And then it sets a lower limit of at least 30 members per legislature and no more than 80 members per legislature. This authority that the Electoral Commission had ended on the 31st of March 1999. In 1998, the Western Cape's provincial constitution came into effect. And I think we all know that Section 13 of the provincial constitution determines that the provincial parliament consists of 42 elected members, which is, by the way, the same number it was in 1994. At this point, there was uncertainty as to whether the Electoral Commission's determination in terms of the national legislation or the determination of the provincial constitution is the one that is applicable, which one should prevail. At the time, the Electoral Commission determined a number of 39 members for the Western Cape. In Premier of the Province of the Western Cape, that was about 25 years ago, so this case law is already quite old. That issue was decided by the Constitutional Court. I'm not going to read all of that, but some of it. The court said that the issue was whether Section 105 sub 2 of the and the legislation passed pursuant thereto has any application to the composition of a provincial legislature, which is provided for in a provincial constitution. And then the court is quite clear in its view. It says it does not. Section 143 sub 1 permits provincial constitutions to provide for different legislative structures and procedures for provinces that choose to establish their own distinctive legislatures. If a provincial constitution regulates the procedures and structures of a provincial legislature, and in so doing does not violate Section 143 sub 2, then the provisions of Chapter 6 of the Constitution have no application to that province. And then the third sub-bullet point there, once a province has determined its own legislative structures in terms of Section 143, such structures cannot be altered by national legislation. So, long story short, there are two ways in which the number of members of a legislature can be determined. The first one is in accordance with a provincial constitution, and then the second one is in accordance with the Electoral Act. At this point in time, the other 8 legislatures numbers are determined in terms, and has been determined, I'll get to that, in terms of the Electoral Act. Also important here, what has changed and what I suppose also partly informs why we are having this conversation now. In 2021, the Electoral Act was amended by the Electoral Laws Amendment Act. The formula in the Electoral Act is the same as it was in 1999. That has not changed. But what has changed is that a provision was introduced, which reads as follows. The determination of seats contemplated in items 1 and 2 must be completed by the Commission before every election, and the Commission must publish such a determination in the prescribed manner. So effectively, what happened in 1999, that authority that the Electoral Commission had to determine the number of seats is now it's now a activity that the Electoral Commission will perform before every election. I see I'm still in past tense there, Chairperson, on the next bullet point for the 2024 general election, and thereafter the number of members of the other provincial legislatures will be determined in this manner, and that has in fact happened already, and I will get to that. In March of 2023, the Provincial Parliament adopted recommendations by this committee at the time that Section 13 of the Constitution of the Western Cape be amended to increase the number of members of the Provincial Parliament. Chair, I'm going to spend some, I think this is probably a bit more interesting. So the implications of the Electoral Laws Amendment Act for the membership of the other provincial legislatures. As the members can see there, this is the changes that occurred in 2024, a few months ago, just with the general election. And basically by applying the formula, the Electoral Commission has made the following changes to the membership of the other provinces. So the Eastern Cape got an additional 9 members and now have 72 members, which means that they are on the 1 in 100,000 proportion. The Free State's population is still below 3 million, and accordingly, the Free State did not receive any additional members. Gauteng went to the upper limit of 80. Gauteng is a population of 60 million, but as the Constitution and the Electoral Act provides, the upper limit is 80. KwaZulu-Natal has been at 80 members since 1999 already, so that has not changed. Limpopo received quite a large number of additional members, 15. Mpumalanga was, I'm not sure it's correct to say the biggest beneficiary, but let's go with that, of the increase in membership. They received an additional 21 members. Northern Cape, small population, membership remained unchanged. Northwest received 5 additional members. And then, of course, in the Western Cape, because there was no constitutional amendment, there was also no change in the number of seats. So since 1994, the membership or the number of seats in the Western Cape has always been 42. The newest estimate, population estimate, is 7.4 million, which is the figure that the Electoral Commission included in the Government Gazette when they published these determinations. So there was no increase in members for the Western Cape. And then in brackets, I indicate if the same formula was applied to the Western Cape, the Western Cape would have received 32 additional members and would have had 74 members. So in fact, the Western Cape would have been received by quite a large number, the largest number of additional members. So at present, the proportion is, as I said earlier, there's 1 member for every 167,000 residents, which is quite close, I noticed, to Gauteng. That is 1 member for every 200,000 residents. So if one looks at Gauteng and the Western Cape at this point in time, there's quite a large departure from that 1 in 100,000 formula. Chair, just a few comments on the development of the bill. In March 2023, the House result for the Speaker to be the member in charge of the bill. It was the purpose to give effect to findings by a parliamentary committee. Some of those findings were the number of seats allocated to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament is no longer adequate. The current number seats is not sufficient to represent the people of the Western Cape optimally, as accountability is compromised. A draft Constitution of the Western Cape First Amendment Bill was prepared. That was what the bill was called at the time. Its name has changed since, and it may change again. It was the objective of the proposed draft bill to amend Section 13 of the Constitution of the Western Cape to increase the number of members. And that draft bill, as we were constitutionally required to do, it was published in accordance with Section 10 of the Provincial Constitution, and then it was tabled in Provincial Parliament in July of 2023. Chair, on the timelines and deadlines, I'm not going to spend too much time on the first 6 points there, because those are things that already happened. The bill has now been revived. So in November 2023, the bill, as it was at the time, was referred to the House. It was a very simple bill. It was a 1-pager. I'm sure the members have seen it. And long story short, it substitutes 42 with 48. And then there are some other provisions that I don't think are really important. So it was a simple substitution of 42 members to provide for 48 members. That was the recommendation of the committee at the time to the House, and that is the version of the bill that went to the House. The bill was not passed by the end of the 6th parliamentary term, and then the bill, as the chairperson already indicated, was revived in the 7th parliamentary term. I want to point out, this is important for a constitutional amendment, that any constitutional amendment will have to be referred to the Constitution Constitutional Court for certification. Once it's been certified by the Constitutional Court, it can be referred to the Premier for assent. And of course, that process, it's difficult to anticipate, but it can take quite a long time, the certification. And of course, it depends on whether there are persons that want to oppose the amendment. So that is something one would want to provide some time for. When we did the initial planning quite some time ago, we even anticipated what if the Constitutional Court doesn't certify it and we have to come back and make some changes, which is, by the way, what actually happened with the provincial constitution as well. There were a few things that the Constitutional Court said, no, you cannot do that, go back and change some things. As far as consultation is concerned, there's been quite a lot of consultation on the bill. There was internal consultation. There was an ad hoc committee WCPP seats, which was also briefed on the bill. That committee consisted in the 6th Parliament of representatives of all the political parties. And that committee made recommendations to the House regarding the number of members. And then also this committee in the 6th term made recommendations to the House regarding the number of members. Further, there were consultations, of course, in the parliamentary administration quite extensively, especially if we are talking about an effective doubling of the number of members in the legislature. Clearly, there will be all sort of administrative and space and financial implications that goes with that. Consultation with the Director General for the province, of course, with Provincial Treasury, the Provincial Department of Infrastructure, and the Provincial Department of Police Oversight and Community Safety, and also with the Electoral Commission. As far as public involvement is concerned, as I said earlier, the bill was published in accordance with Section 10 of the Constitution of the Western Cape. A few comments, I think 1 or 2 comments was received as part of that process. And then also in August and September and October of last year, and colleagues can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think there were 5 public hearings, being in George, Saldanha, Cape Town, Paarl, and Hermanus. Of course, there is what we call a matrix. There's a document that records all the comments that were made. As a part of that process, I've also made some comments or responses to some of those comments. So all of that is, there's a record of that entire process. Also, further comments was received from the Office of the Premier, specifically Legal Services, the Commission for Gender Equality, on the issue of promoting gender equality in legislatures, Provincial Treasury, and then also from the Parliamentary Administration, specifically the Chief Financial Officer and Language Services. On the financial implications, clearly there will be a financial implication for the Constitutional Court matter. But maybe more importantly and more long-term, the bill will have financial implications in respect of remuneration for members, accommodation for members, allowances to political parties, enabling allowances, support by the parliamentary administration, and operational expenditure related to the work of members. The figures I have here were figures made available by the Chief Financial Officer in 2023. I don't know whether there might be slight deviations in that between 23 and 24, but I think it should be fairly accurate. And those were just some projections. If we add 6 members, then there would be an additional expenditure of about 22 million rands per year. And then all the way up to adding 72 members, there will be, 30 members, there will be an additional expenditure of about 96 million rands per year. I think that is also important, especially in the public hearings, for the public to sort of get a sense of the cost benefit. And then, of course, the questions were, can we justify that kind of expenditure and so on. Chair, there's quite a few I thought I'd leave it here. There were some other presentations done on policy options. How can one amend the provincial constitution? But I'm not sure, I'll be guided by the committee as to whether that will become part of the conversation.
Thank you very much. It's, I think, important that everybody in the committee is up to speed where we are. I should have asked the speaker to make some introductory comments, but I think at this point I'll ask the speaker if you want to add anything to this, give any direction, your viewpoints on this. Okay, I'll take it silence.
My apologies, Chair. I've been trying to unmute. No comments from my side. Just to again give my commitment that we will support the committee because the bill is now in front of the committee. So whatever assistance and support and guidance you need from my office and through the administration, we will provide the necessary support, whichever way the committee decides to go with this bill.
Thank you. And then the acting secretary, Mr. Titus, from the administration side.
No comment at this stage, ma'am.
All right, then we can throw this open for questions from members of the committee. I have Member Philander.
Thank you very much.
Please go ahead.
My apologies. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairperson. I welcome the presentation, Advocate Leroux. From my side, I hear two things. One, as indicated on page 5, that obviously what is presented is based on data provided. Also, what I hear from your latter comment is that is an increase justified? So what of the two is it? Based on serving the amount as mentioned, 1 per 100,000, based on the financial implications, if a member of the public says that they don't see the need for increase in seats, but based on data provided, it actually justifies that in the Western Cape there should be an increase. What weighs heavier in terms of having the seats increased in this parliament? And then perhaps just also based on the financial implications, what is the capability, if I can call it like that, lack of a better word, of this parliament to actually carry that extra financial implication, and also perhaps just more insight into the certification process, please. Thank you, Chair.
I've got 3 questions. Should we? I've got 3 questions. Should we deal with all 3, or do you want to deal with them one at a time?
Whichever way you prefer, Chairperson.
Okay, I think let's just get them all in then. Member Heron?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, before we get into the substance of the bill, I would like to understand where do we go from here procedurally, because the bill was not adopted in the 6th Parliament, but revived in the 7th. There was a public consultation process that took place in the 6th Parliament. In terms of it being revived, does it get revived with all those public comments? Because you haven't presented them to us, and some of us are new on this committee, so you can't assume that historically we have this information. But if we have to rely and look at the public consultation that happened in the 6th Parliament, then that would be useful to have. Or do we have to start the process afresh? So I don't really want to get into the substance yet until I understand what is the process after this bill has been revived that this committee and this has to undertake before we can bring it back to Parliament.
Thanks. And then I've got Member Bryant online.
Can I just add one thing? We didn't get a copy of the bill, and I can't find it online. The advert is online, but no, I can't find the bill.
We'll send it to, okay, thanks. The procedural officer will send it through to you. And then I've got member Bryant online, and then also after that I have got member Syed.
Thanks very much, Chairperson. I think I'm partially covered by the previous speakers, but my question to Mr. Leroux would be, in terms of the research that's been undertaken so far in terms of the capacity of the current Parliament as it stands in terms of numbers to carry out its functions, is there any indication at present that increasing the size of the component of the number of members would have a significant positive impact on the provision of service delivery, but also to improve the ability of Parliament to function better as a whole? Has there been any sort of empirical research that's been undertaken?
And then we have member Syed, who's joining us from quite a distance.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And in fact, in this distance, we just had a meeting on Tuesday with the delegation of the Welsh Parliament. They're also undergoing a similar process. And the Deputy Speaker actually asked the delegation to share with us their research and their rationale that they are using, because they're also increasing. So it's not only us who are looking at these type of aspects, Chairperson. Chair, just to, and I think mine is to also follow on from the question by Member Bryant and Member Heron. I think firstly, from Member Heron's one, with regards to the process, I think I just want to also reiterate that where do we then go in terms of the process, but also just in terms of the process as well. Let's say now we've adopted it, we've agreed, right? Let's yeah, basically, if we agree at some point during this particular term, what are the scenarios? Because you hear various ideas being put around out there, but I want to hear from the technical team. I know one option, which for me, I mean, has seemed to be one of the more dominant views, has been to ensure that it gets implemented. So the actual seat increase will only happen in the 2029 or post-2029 elections. But there's a lot of speculation as well. And as leader of the opposition, I've been receiving these particular messages of hope, so to speak, from some of the other political parties as well. Looking at the possibility as to whether this seat increase will actually be affected during this particular term. Yeah, this is what we've been hearing. So I just wanted to get a sense from the technical team, what is possible and what's not possible in terms of the timing. Then the second aspect, I think, tying in with what Member Philander stated, is just to look. I don't think the argument of saying, no, this is what this is what the law allows, this is what the IEC is doing. I mean, quite frankly, citizens don't buy those arguments at this moment in time. I think the main thing is going to be to illustrate why this is needed in terms of ensuring ultimately that service delivery can be driven. So I want to get a sense as to whether that type of research has been conducted. And I want to state research independent from the executive, because we know there's executive and there's treasury that's going to look into numbers, but we must be very careful to ensure, because ultimately the legislature or parliament in this case holds the executive accountable. So we just want to see what kind of research is available in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then the final question we've got is from Member Walters.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, most of my points were covered. I just think that the information that we received in terms of the cost implications, we need to update that before we consider the matter. It is, I think, out of date, and particularly in terms of cost implications. And then also what needs to be included in the cost implications when we consider this is also matters like alterations that might have to take place in terms of the chamber. We need to have a full cost implication of this. And I just wanted to suggest when we consider the matter, that's included. Thanks.
Thank you very much. If I may turn over to the officials, and I think also just to reiterate, I think the process is really important. What the process from here is going forward. We understand what's happened previously to get us to this point, but I think it's really important that we understand where we go from here.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just make some remarks, and then I'll ask the rest of my colleagues to respond to some of the input. So I'm going to start with the question raised by Member Philander and then further accentuated by Member Walters. It is correct that the financials must be updated. I don't think when we did the initial calculations that we had taken into account the salary remuneration increases gazetted by the president. So those will have to be updated. The other implication is also around support for members, the predictions around what that could look like over the next few years, just pertaining to the comments that specifically Member Sayed had mentioned. What would this look like over a period of time? So that kind of predictive analytics, if one can call it, is necessary for us to do as part of the exercise to support the committee. I do think that the initial conversations with Provincial Treasury, well, Treasury is well aware, as Advocate Leroux had indicated, they are well aware of the process. What we need, obviously, as the officials or as the administration, is definitive decision. And I think that it's a little bit early for us to be able to do that because the committee is obviously still busy with its process. I think what the other point is, so it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg kind of scenario that we're busy with. I think the other important point that was raised here is the case for change and the value of the change, because I think that is an important consideration for the committee. Because if we're not able to, as the committee, make the case for change and the value that will bring to the democratic process, then that presents us with a dilemma. It becomes a little bit of a moot point, considering that we have our own constitution. We may not have had this conversation had we not had our own constitution. And it may have just been an automatic IEC process. But we are in this position and we know what the kind of feedback had been. The comment from Member Heron, who's new to the committee, we will provide the necessary information and the input that we've received from the public as far as our consultation and engagement processes were concerned. I think that becomes important to consider where it is that the thinking of the people of the Western Cape is going as well. So the public consultation process, as we are continuing, will obviously, as a committee, continue beyond this, because there's going to be a fresh look, Chairperson, at this particular bill and how this will impact. I do think that the issue around the case for change becomes an extremely important one, because that would then speak to the abilities of Parliament in executing its overall mandate impressed by the Constitution of South Africa. And then I think the last comment that I want to make is the comment around what is possible and what is not possible, what is feasible, because we also know that despite the fact, and I think the scenarios that Advocate Leroux had pointed out has various incremental membership increases. And I think part of that would have looked at what is the feasibility and what would be the kind of break-even point when we begin to look at the financials. But we've got to juxtapose that against what the value is as well. Just my comments. I'm going to ask Advocate Leroux to comment on the technical parts and maybe also on some of the things that I've now said. Mr. Sassman, on if there's still talk around process, or Mr. Stimele in that regard, to just comment on the process, because I think the process is important, as well as the work of the committee going forward now to map the work that the committee will be looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to try and not speak to issues that Mr. Titus already spoke to. The member asked about some more particulars on the certification process. Okay, I'll make a few comments, but effectively, Chairperson, it's an application proceeding to the Constitutional Court. So we will make an application to the Constitutional Court. And interesting enough, if one looks at the Constitutional Court rules, there's not a lot of particulars there about certification of provincial constitutions. And I think that's probably because it's not something that has happened more than once before. Effectively, the Constitutional Court will issue instructions or directives regarding the way forward. I would certainly imagine that the Constitutional Court will probably require us to publish and to inform people of the fact that there is an application in the Constitutional Court, so that one can see whether there is any opposition to the proposed certification, and then the matter will be set down, and depending on whether there is opposition, argument will be heard, and the court will make a decision on whether the proposed amendment aligns with the Constitution, to put it that way. Chair, I must say, this is not. This should be a much simpler, more straightforward, substantively issue than the certification of the Constitution itself some time ago, because it's effectively, and one never knows what's going to happen, but it's effectively on an issue that's already been decided. So the fact that a provincial legislature can determine the number of seats in its provincial constitution, that's already been decided by the Constitutional Court. So I do not think it is likely that it will be a legally challenging argument, but there may be other arguments that other organizations or persons may want to make, that the Constitutional Court will have to hear. There was some, I think Member Syed mentioned the issue of what is possible in terms of timing. I agree that practically the amendment will only become effective in all likelihood in 2029 as a part of the Electoral Commission process at that time. And I think I can keep it very simple by saying that there's no technical reason why there cannot be a constitutional amendment well before that. We are already in the legislative process. I do maybe, or I should maybe make the point that, of course, we are very much, as far as the legislative process is concerned, very much in the hands of the lawmakers. In terms of timelines, in terms of decisions on public involvement, et cetera, et cetera. But technically, I will simply say there's nothing technically challenging about the bill. Maybe the Constitutional Court process is a process that one would want to make sure that there is enough time to attend to that. But even that process, there's no reason why that cannot be concluded. It's certainly in this term, or maybe even if the House passes a bill, let's say the next year, there's certainly not a reason why the Constitutional Court cannot attend to it during the year after that. So there's no technical reason why it cannot be done. I think there were some comments on empirical research, and I think Mr. Titus already spoke to that. I'll maybe just make the comment that it would probably, in terms of talking about the cost benefit, that there might be space for that sort of analysis of if there's an argument that membership is inadequate, sort of what is that based on scientifically? How many members from a more maybe objective perspective is required? If one looks at, I mean, the determination of membership all over the world varies massively, but there are objective criteria one can look at. For example, there's some provinces in Canada that has actually quite a lot of members relative to their population. The population is very small, but it's in an absolutely massive province. I think the province is probably bigger than the Republic of South Africa. So that would be the kind of assessment that people, the kind of facts that people would look at. And there might be, it's not really for me to say, but there might be space for that sort of an analysis where one can say this is objectively, this is what is needed to deliver the following oversight and lawmaking outputs in the province. Chair, let me just check. I don't think I will comment. I think I'll leave the comments on the process, the way forward. I'll leave that to my colleagues Sussman and Mr. Mele. If there's any questions I missed, then the members can just let me know.
Chairperson, I just want to hear from the director if there's any response from him first. Thank you.
No, you can start, Mr. Sussman, it's fine.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Chairperson, in terms of the process, I think that the committee and its members first need to familiarize themselves with what transpired in the 6th Parliament in terms of the committee that dealt with the bill. Perhaps just look at the matrix, the comments, and to see if they are happy, because the bill has now been referred to this particular committee and the members are new. So that would be the first step. Then, Chairperson, for this committee then to consider, as Advocate Leroux mentioned, whether the status of the amendment bill is still sufficient and stands as is. And then for the committee to apply its mind in terms of whether they want to look at other options, and apply its mind also to the implications of that, cost implications and all other implications. And then for the committee to determine whether it wants to have additional public hearings or not, because the current status of the hearings was not specifically about a particular scenario, but presenting all the scenarios, and this committee would then determine the way forward. So it may not be necessary to go back to the citizens, and then for it to determine its way forward, and then to report on the matter to the House. And that would be before the report, the legislative process in terms of the motion of desirability, and then the finalizing of the amendment bill as is or amended, and then report to the House. Thanks, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. Are there any follow-up questions that people want to ask? I've got one from Member Heron, and I've got one from Member Bryant. Member Heron.
Thanks, Chair. So obviously we need, if I understand Mr. Sassman correctly, we need to get the historical information, which we don't have, around the public consultation processes, and then decide if we are going to have additional public hearings and additional public consultation. But I would assume that we would need to see what happened historically before we can make any recommendations on that. I think before we make those decisions, the cost implications will have to be updated. And I would like to ask a question around that. There are the indicative costs here, but do these costs assume that there will be an additional allocation to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament, or are these costs to be absorbed within the current projected allocations to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament? Because then there will be an impact on the amount that is allowed for secretarial allowances, constituency allowances may be reduced. So are we going to find additional funding, or are we going to try and cover the additional costs within the envelope that's already earmarked for the Western Cape Provincial Parliament? That information, I think, should be provided. I mean, I know it's speculative, but there are implications for the way we operate now. If the provincial fiscus or treasury is not able to allocate additional funding, it will mean a reduction in the funding allocated to per member for Western Cape constituency allowances and the secretarial allowance, and I assume the enabling allowance. I think on the case for change, which we'll get into the substance, which I don't really want to get too much into it now, but I think, I mean, these are not legal arguments, these are political arguments, where this is the most political thing that any parliament can do, is say we're going to increase the number of public reps, because it directly relates to political activity and political rights of residents or voters. So I think for the case for change must come from the politicians. We must be saying, and maybe it's implicit in this language, that we're not coping in serving the people of Western Cape with 42 members. And I find that non-persuasive. So I think the case for change, if we want to go out to the public and say, you need more public reps, then we must be saying, because we're not managing with 42. And I find that really hard to, I don't find it very persuasive, but I could be persuaded by others. In my own experience, I'm coping just fine. But I think before we get into that stuff, and I don't want to open a debate about it, but I make the point because the case for change that has been asked by members can't be asked of officials. The politicians must answer that question about whether there's a case for change, and it must be based on the work that we're doing and the work that we would like to do, and whether there's an overload of work that means we need more members to do the work. So if I may maybe just summarize, if we move forward, could we get the historical information, updated financials, and also some information around where this funding could come from? And thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Bryant?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I think the real question here is whether or not we are able to cope in terms of our oversight responsibilities and the number of committees one serves on, etc. And I think that is potentially, yes, a question that we are going to have to answer as a committee. But it would be good to have some information. And perhaps once we receive the previous deliberations, we can start to maybe evaluate that. Because I think the real challenge for us is we don't want to be sitting, a few years down the line, still dealing with this issue. I think, it is something that should be decided within, a sensible time frame. And that's why I do believe it's very, very important that we get that time frame and those timelines set up so that we can really start to work towards, setting some deadlines as to when this is dealt with. So it's not something which is, hanging over the heads of the Parliament for the next couple of years.
Thank you very much. And then Member Syed?
Chairperson, sorry, I was losing my signal when there was a response, I think, on my first question, the one about when this possible seat increase can come into effect. What are the legal parameters? Thank you. If I could maybe just get a response to that very, very briefly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, thank you. Yes, I did comment on that. I'll add the following. Chair, I mean, from the administration side, we've done it before, and we can, and certainly will do it again, to propose a timeline for completion, let me call it, of this project up until the point where the bill is enacted or is assented to by the president. I've indicated that we're in a new term. The Act will only become operative in all likelihood in 2029, and that there is no technical difficulty with completing the process in that time. If I think about the Constitutional Court process, and depending on the length of the lawmaking process, if the law, it really depends on political will. But if the lawmaking process is concluded in 6 months, let's say, and the Constitutional Court process is concluded in a year, then that would more or less be. I can't think of any reason why there cannot be an act in between a year, 18 months, 24 months. Technically, there's no difficulty with completing the process in this term.
Chair, perhaps just to comment on some of the latter comments. Member Heron's questions around or comments around requirement for historical information, we can certainly provide that to the committee. The cost implications and the update of the costs, we can certainly do that. And in line with the projections that Andre is speaking about, we can possibly also look at what our target date is and what we're talking about in terms of incremental cost over time. The Western Cape Provincial Parliament is obviously part of the equitable share in the province. And our current baselines, I mean, what is being projected is beyond whatever baselines we currently have. And so it will not be able to be funded within the current fiscal situation that we find ourselves in. And so additional funds will have to be secured. We have had initial conversations with Treasury, as I said earlier on. It also cannot be happening at the expense of the broader equitable share in the province. So because that has other implications, I think, for direct service delivery, et cetera, et cetera. So it is a tricky one, but it's something that will have to be discussed at another level, even beyond provincial treasury, with regard to funding and feasibility. But I get here the point that Member Heron is raising. It also cannot mean that as a result of a decision that members of parliament, this parliament, will be out of pocket as a result of being elected public officials to perform work that they are required to do. So that is the context that we've got to consider, but it's also a context that I think Provincial Treasury is well aware of currently.
Can I just put a pin in a very specific issue in terms of the timelines? So I think it's a good point. I mean, if I think of certification judgments, I mean, it is only the Western Cape that has the case law. If everything were to go according to plan, that has been explained to us without any hiccups, what you're saying is that the earliest that this matter, if it were to go for an increase, could be before the Premier for an assent would essentially be what you're saying, the second half of 26, if you're talking about an 18-month period.
Chair, I think that is fair, but it also depends, I think, on some decisions the committee must make in terms of public involvement. And there was mention about the research. Is the committee of the view that some sort of research should be commissioned? And so all of that can have a knock-on effect. But in general, I agree with.
So in essence, what you're saying, sorry, I'm just going to follow up. So in essence, the process itself would unfold at the pace that it would unfold, and in any event is not going to be imminent, I think is really what I'm trying to get at. So when we'll be looking at a timeline of latter half of 26 running into 27, and that's aside from the other concerns that obviously are raised. Okay, now I understand. Member Heron?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I'm not sure if this will be able to be answered, but if the Western Cape was to increase the number of seats in its parliament, it would also affect parties that are outside of the Western Cape. If I understand, the allocation of funding from the IEC is based on the number of seats parties have. So if the IEC has 400 million rand to allocate in one financial year to parties based on the number of seats they have, what we decide here could reduce the amount that's allocated to a party that's only represented in the Eastern Cape, for example, or KwaZulu-Natal, because they will now receive less because there's now more members in the Western Cape. So to what extent do we have to consult or allow them to comment on our plan to increase the number of seats, given that there is a financial implication for parties that are not necessarily represented here, could be represented in only one province? Thank you.
Before you answer that, could I just add a tail to that? I mean, surely the opposite also applies. We've seen some quite seriously large increases in other provinces. No increase here because we have the constitution. I mean, I know we're getting into very speculative ground now, but I mean, would that also potentially have an effect going forward?
Chair, as the member indicated, I don't think I have an answer to the technical part of the question, but what I can confirm is we have consulted with the IEC, and we do continuously consult with the IEC. So they've always been aware of the situation in the Western Cape. The understanding was that we would pass a constitutional amendment in the sixth term, which didn't happen. But the IEC is aware of the intention, let me put it that way, to increase the membership. How that factors into their budgeting, etc., I'm not quite sure.
Okay, so I mean, I'm not seeing any other follow-ups. So there is essentially quite a lot of homework that needs to be done on the current documentation before us, before we can really have a thorough discussion on where we go from here in terms of this. Can I get some ideas from the Standing Committee on, I mean, this ties into resolutions. I would propose that we then sort of adjourn this section or this matter until we get those updated reports, at which point we could then continue with the deliberations. I just want to get a feel from the committee if we're in agreement with that.
Chairperson, yes, thank you. I do agree with you in terms of, as indicated by the members, let us get the necessary information, have an opportunity to scrutinize those and reconvene as a committee, because ultimately that will also inform the process that the committee will embark on further once we have received those information. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Member Heron?
I was just going to say I agree with the way you've framed it, that we need information and we can adjourn this part until we have that information.
Okay, I've got Member Sayed and then I've got Member Van Wyk. Member Sayed?
Sure, yes, I want to agree with the other members on that, but I want to also just ask that whatever information, I mean, if we can get the written information before we have another meeting on this matter, so that we can also just prepare and look at it, all the issues that we have raised, if it can speak to that. Thank you, Chair. And then, if you don't mind, I'm going to take my leave now once this item is over. It's 7 o'clock this side, and I've got some things to do. Thank you.
No problem. And I think that's a very good resolution then, that we also ask for a very timeous report so that we have time to digest it. And then Member Van Wyk?
Yes, good day, Chair, good day, members and officials. Yes, I would agree with the basic resolution. One of the aspects that we also need information on is the cost implication of the chamber. How does one deal with an increase relative to the chamber that we have and the office accommodation. And, you know, if we increase by 10 members or by 20 members, there are also naturally further implications there on what that additional once-off cost would be to get that level of accommodation in place, and what that length of time would be to put that in place would also then need to be factored in, I would imagine. So, you know, I think that's probably some of the issues that need to be dealt with. And then I'm not sure how we deal or amplify or, in fact, explain and motivate the benefit then of an increased membership, because somehow that is also something that needs to be ultimately put down in terms of some form of motivation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just want to ask, in terms of the actual process, do we refer the report back or do we postpone the item? What is the best way of dealing with this in terms of the actual procedure?
Referring this report.
Yes.
There will be no report. The committee will just all the information will be given to the committee.
Okay.
And then the chair can determine a date for the next meeting.
Okay. All right. So I think we've got a pretty good record here of the information that we require. Even in my very bad handwriting, it says here hysterical, but I know it actually means historical information. The comprehensive finances, then, which obviously covers the costing, the value of change, obviously that is more or less a political argument there. And also I think the matrix that showed the comments that were made, so that we're also then up to speed on the view of everyone who was consulted. I think if that then goes into the amended report, which can then be sent through to the members, I think, at a good date prior to the following meeting. I know we do have a meeting scheduled for the 22nd, but I think that is probably too soon for this kind of information. Would people be in agreement with that? Okay, all right. Any comments on that before we move on? No. Okay, all right. Thank you, everybody, and thank you for allowing us to get through that particular matter. I think that is all in terms of the administration. So I think you're excused. You can go and enjoy your Friday and then your weekend. Thank you very much. We would offer you tea, but I think there was a bit of a hiccup, so there isn't any. Thank you. Members, do we want to continue straight through or just take a 5-minute break?
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, let's take a 5-minute break.
Thank you. I'm taking my lead.
We will commence at, let's commence at 9:45. That's in 5-6 minutes. Thanks, everyone.
Chairperson, can I propose that we continue unless there's anyone that desperately needs to take a body break?
That's fine with me. I mean, it's not particularly onerous. Okay, let's just continue then. Right. Okay, thank you, everyone. Item 4, that would be the consideration and adoption of a draft committee report on the 2023-24 annual report for the Department of the Premier. Can we please flight that? I'm going to take it that everybody has read the documentation. Are there any comments or issues to do with this? If not, I think we can proceed to adopt the report.
I propose adoption, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Seconded by Member Heron. Then the consideration and adoption of the draft committee quarterly report April to June and July to September. I'm also going to take them as read. Can you just pull that up, please? Right. Again, are there any comments, questions, or otherwise things people wish to raise? Yes, Member Heron.
I just want to check. I did write to Asima that she changed my surname and, okay, she did, thanks. She had it down as Brett.
There we go, got that changed. The proposer? Thank you. And then a seconder. Thank you very much.
I'll second.
Okay, there we go. Thank you. Then we have consideration and adoption of the draft committee meeting minutes of the 7th of October. Lots of alliteration there.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh, there's another one.
July to September.
Okay, July to September. Proposer. Thank you. And then, thank you very much. Draft committee minutes 7th of October. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there we are. Okay, again, taking that as read. And a proposer.
Propose that we adopt, Chair.
Thank you. And a seconder. Thank you. Good doing business with the two of you. Right. Then resolutions actions. We have determined that we are going to be requesting an update. And do you have everything that was highlighted that we require?
I actually sent it already, Chair.
You've sent it already. Well, fantastic.
Yes.
So retrospectively, we will approve that resolution. Are there any other resolutions or actions anybody wants to bring up?
Yeah, we added to that.
The financial costs?
Thank you, Chair. Now, as I mentioned to the committee that all the historical information has been sent to the members. It's in the inbox. And then the resolution will be the update on finances and the cost implications of the chairman of office accommodation and overall for the increase. Thank
That's
you.
basically all that's still outstanding based on what you've sent.
And when you say the historical information, does that include the matrix?
Matrix is included.
Thank you, Chair. So through you, I sent through the bill as well as the draft A list, which was the amendments that were proposed by the previous committee, as well as the B bill, which would be the bill that in essence would have been the final bill with the proposed amendments, and then the matrix summarizing the inputs from the public participation, the minutes of the last meeting where they deliberated on the motion of desirability and all the information that's in there, and the historical timelines of the process of the bill, when the bill was introduced, when it was for public participation, and when the committee finalized. So if the members need anything further, they can just let me know. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much. I think that is pretty much it. The next meeting is scheduled for the 22nd of November. On that agenda, we are dealing with the civil service, is it the civil service? Public service amendment issues. Just a briefing on that, as well as a portion on options for an oversight visit in February in the Central Karoo district. So we can then also have a look at that. If there's no further comment, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you to the staff, and have a productive Friday and weekend. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair.